between the sterling and the FTSE 100. So if the sterling starts rallying into the beginning of next year, which is of course a likely scenario if this is a strong deal, then the FTSE is not the place to hide, so to speak, from, at least not from foreign soil. Domestic investors may look for the opportunity to buy FTSE.
What out of the deal in terms of the details? I mean, Anna went through a lot of them, things that we're waiting for. What specifically are you waiting to hear about the very granular details, not just the outline of this agreement?
I'm actually looking for details on the service component. We know that the UK economy is almost 80% the service economy. So if we get some signals from the parties that they will look into the service component during the next years, then I actually think that's the most bullish component that we could get on such a press conference. So services is the key.
Services are the key. What do you make of what this means for the BOE? We saw obviously a huge move in the gilt market yesterday, and the money market's now pricing in March 22 compared with November. What do you think this means for the Bank of England?
I'm not so sure that this rules out a cut from Bank of England. Should we get a rally in sterling into the first quarter next year, then we know that inflation will take a beating down the road in the UK due to the very FX-sensitive inflation in UK. So if we get this strong rally in sterling, why shouldn't Bank of England be willing to cut interest rates into such a sterling rally? I think it's still on the table in such a scenario.
What about going negative? Does this reduce that likelihood?
Not really, because the best way to reflect a sterling positivity is actually to go to negative. We know that negative interest rates works to counter a strong currency. So that's basically the best way to reflect it for Bank of England, to go to negative if the sterling rallies too much.
All right, thank you for joining us this morning, and stay right there. You're going to be sticking with us the first half hour or so. Andreas Steno Larsen from Nordea Markets on Christmas Eve. We thank him very much. Now let's get you up to speed on some other headlines this morning with our First Word News. President Trump has pardoned his ex-campaign chief, Paul Manafort, convicted in 2017 of lying to tax authorities about millions he earned as a political consultant in Ukraine. He also pardoned longtime advisor Roger Stone, convicted of lying to Congress, and Charles Kushner, the father of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And House Republicans plan to block Speaker Nancy Pelosi's bill today, which boosts stimulus checks to $2,000. President Trump demanded the larger payments, but in a private call, the House Minority Leader asked members to reject the proposal, which requires unanimous consent. And a COVID-19 vaccine developed by Chinese pharma firm Sinovac has been found to be more than 50% effective in a Brazilian trial. But researchers are delaying releasing more information at the request of the company. 50% is the minimum standard set by U.S. regulators for emergency authorization. Vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna have produced far better results. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Now up next, Alibaba under pressure this morning. China targets Jack Ma's internet empire in a monopoly probe, sending the tech shares stumbling this morning. We're down more than 8% in Hong Kong trading. Details next. This is Bloomberg.
better, thank goodness. When we did surveys, a month or so ago, there was almost 50% of the people had some reservations or skepticism about getting vaccinated. The last survey, which was just last week, they said that more than 65% of the people said that they would be willing to get the vaccine. We really want to get that up even much higher than that, because the projection is that if you get anywhere between 70 and 85% of the population vaccinated, you would create an umbrella of immunity over the community, which could really get the level of virus so low that it would not be a threat. And then you could answer the question that everyone seems to be asking appropriately, is that when can we start approaching some degree of normality? When can we be doing things like safely having the children in school, or going to a restaurant and sitting indoors, or going to a movie theater? I would think if we start getting the general population vaccinated, let's say mid-April, between now and then, we're going through the various priorities. We started off healthcare providers and people in nursing homes and long-term facilities. The second level is people over 75 and individuals in what's called necessary or important places in society to keep society running. And that could be anything from a police officer to a fireman to someone who runs a grocery store so people can get food. When you get through those priorities and you get to what I call open season, like anybody can get the vaccination, even though you're not in a priority group, I imagine that's probably going to be sometime in April. And then if we can really get vaccines going in April, May, June, July, and August, by the time we get to the end of the summer, I think we can get to that goal that I'm talking about getting the overwhelming majority of the population vaccinated.
Dr. Anthony Fauci there, director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, speaking to Bloomberg about the vaccine rollout. He also said the U.S. is trying to obtain samples of the virus variant from the United Kingdom for further testing. We do know the UK is doing a ton of sequencing, and they found that variant, and the CDC says it could potentially already be in the United States. Now, staying in the United States, talk about stimulus. House Republicans are set to block Nancy Pelosi's bid to pass a bill boosting relief checks to $2,000. And this is according to Bloomberg sources who participated in a call between House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and GOP members. Now, Pelosi has taken up President Trump's plea for larger payments and is planning to seek approval in Congress today. Joining us now is Andreas Steno-Larsen, Chief Global Strategist at Nordea Markets. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Andreas, it's Christmas Eve. It's insane that this stimulus deal has yet to be passed. We don't have a veto. Pelosi has taken what Trump said on board, but it looks like that's going to get blocked. Do you see stimulus coming through in the United States before the new year?
Yes, I do. I mean, they have a deadline 28th of December, and if they don't pass a deal, then a lot of people will fall out of the benefit program, so they simply need to strike a deal. I actually think the door is still open for this $2,000 check from Trump's suggestion. Who wants to steal Christmas? I mean, do the Republicans really want to steal the Christmas for everyone? So I think they will ultimately fold like a lawn chair in this discussion, simply due to the fact that it is very, very tricky to go up against this suggestion by Trump. So I think the door is still open for more stimulus compared to the first version of the deal that we saw.
Yesterday, the consumer spending data was quite weak, the first drop we've seen since April. Consumer spending, of course, is the majority of the U.S. economy. Are you worried, Andreas, that the U.S. economy and recovery is running out of steam?
And not really, but I would start to worry if they don't strike a deal before New Year's, obviously. I think it's really important for the consumption patterns in the U.S. that they keep these direct transfers up. It was a focal point during the recovery in the second quarter this year that they had direct transfers to the regular people in the U.S. So this is a much-needed deal, and if they don't strike a deal, then I would start to be a little bit more scared. But for now, I'm still optimistic.
You're still an optimist that the Republicans are willing to get in those $2,000 stimulus checks. Do you think potentially there can be an agreement between the $600 and $2,000? Could they find a compromise?
maybe it's a good idea to meet in the middle of the